President Monsignor Shea, members of the Annunciation Monastery, members of the Board of Regents, distinguished guests, faculty and administration, parents, siblings, grandparents, friends, and graduates, welcome. What an honor and a blessing it is for us to participate and be a part of this commencement today. I wish that everybody in this auditorium could be standing right here at this place and have the perspective I do. It's been kind of a tough year. But today I look out over these graduates and another whole group of graduates to follow later this afternoon, and I look in your eyes and you give me hope. I see how the University of Mary has prepared you well, how hard you have worked, and you have been formed as servant leaders to go out into the world and really make a difference. And you give me hope. I feel as though I am coming back home this afternoon because I graduated from this institution in 1975 and again in 1988. Literally a lifetime ago. Over the next several minutes, I'd like to share with you three important lessons that I have learned in my life. That's it, just a few stories and three simple lessons. The first lesson is the power of servant leadership. There are few institutions that have made such an important impact on my life as the University of Mary. I was 6 years old when the Sisters of Annunciation Monastery formed this institution. This is where I received my degrees. This is where I met my wife, and she received her degree. It's where our oldest son received his degree and played basketball. And the University of Mary has been a cornerstone of our family and our community, and for that I am exceedingly grateful. The graduates of the University of Mary for the last 50 years have supplied the National Information Solutions Cooperative, NISC, with a constant stream of quality talent. At NISC, our greatest risk was recruiting and retaining the number of people that we need, the accountants and programmers and analysts and database administrators and quality assurance experts and salespeople and marketing. And year after year, there is no question that the pipeline of graduates from this university was a key component in NISC's success. When Sister Thomas Welder would come to visit our campus, our Mandan campus, it would be like a UMary class reunion. As she walked down the halls and greeted the students, and the employees, they would just light up. And most often she would call them by name. My first exposure to servant leadership was in 1974. It was an undergraduate class at the University of Mary, and the teacher was none other than Sister Thomas. And in that class, she told us and talked to us about the characteristics that we as students should aspire to as a servant leader: to be faithful and prayerful, wise, virtuous, humble, obedient, patient, charitable, forgiving, and grateful. And that became my benchmark as I went through life, to go through that list of characteristics and try to answer the question, how do I measure up to the characteristics of a servant leader? Now, when I first heard those characteristics, I was 20 years old, and I'm embarrassed to admit that the concept of servant leadership seemed rather weak and passive. Wasn't a leader supposed to be dynamic and charismatic and decisive and commanding attention. Servant leadership at first blush appeared to be soft and submissive. Little did I know that that seed of servant leadership that was planted by Sister Thomas would have a profound impact on forming the culture of NISC. Several years after graduating from then Mary College, I attended a President's Club event, and I was taken back as I watched Sister Thomas seating the guests, pouring coffee, pouring water, making certain that everyone was having a wonderful evening. And as I watched her from afar, I thought, she is president of this university, but yet she chose to humbly serve her guests. And for this reason and so many more, she was admired by her students and the staff at the University of Mary, by governors, by community leaders, and by CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. She was a music major, for goodness sakes. I wonder if she ever took a management class or business class, but she set an example that any leader would be wise to follow. A turning point in the 50-year history of NISC was when we began to understand and the concept of servant leadership began to sink in. And we understood the responsibility that we had to honor the uniqueness and the dignity of every single one of the 1,400 employees that we had the good fortune to work with every day. And we learned that poignant and impactful lesson from Sister Thomas and her lifelong example. Our current president, Monsignor Shea, has built upon that strong culture of servant leadership. Last night I was at an event at the university. It was a dinner, and Monsignor Shea poured our coffee. The tradition continues. Monsignor Shea has defined this university as faithfully Christian, joyfully Catholic, and gratefully Benedictine. Back in early 2000, when then Father Shea was chaplain at St. Mary's Central High School in Bismarck, this young, joyful, faith-filled priest right out of the seminary had an amazing impact on our kids. And as a parent, it was humbling to watch our kids' faith grow until the point where our children became the teachers, and Lynne and I will be forever grateful for that. It took me 25 years to understand the importance of servant leadership. And as you think about that, I want you to remember this line: if service is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you. If service is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you. To serve means that you recognize that small gestures of gratitude matter, that appreciation matters, that consistency, honesty, and character matter. One of my favorite quotes is by Alan MacDonald when he said, "Always do the right thing, for the right reason, at the right time, with the right people." Now let me be clear. Being a servant leader does not require false modesty. It does not require that you be a shrinking violet. C.S. Lewis was an intellectual giant of the 20th century and arguably one of the most influential writers of his time. And he said this, he said, "Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less." Now that my beard is gray and the wrinkles in my face are deep, wisdom and experience have taught me not to be impressed by money followers, by degrees, positions, titles, and material possessions. but rather I am impressed with kindness and service and integrity and humility and generosity. Jesus was our very best example of a servant leader, and he was the Son of God who humbly was born here on earth just like you and I. Wayne Dyer, a celebrated author, once said, "I don't think that Jesus was teaching Christianity during his time here on earth. He was teaching kindness and love and peace." So be Christ-like. Be Christ-like. Be a servant leader. The second lesson, and perhaps the most difficult, is the necessity of loving your enemies. In January of 2020, Lynne and I had an amazing experience of being able to attend the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. And the keynote speaker was Arthur Brooks. And Arthur was talking about his new book entitled Love Your Enemies: How Decent People Can Save America from a Culture of Contempt. Now, Mr. Brooks is this amazing combination of humility and confidence, and he gave 3 specific reasons why we should love our enemies. Number 1, we should love our enemies because it's the best way to test the quality of our love. It's easy to love those who agree with us, but difficult to love your enemies. The second reason to love your enemies is that it will tell you a lot about yourself. Chances are the things that annoy you about others are the things that are prevalent in your own life. The final reason to love your enemies is that you may just win them back. Martin Luther King is quoted as saying, "You can hate or you can love. I choose to love because hate is too hard." He also said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." Jesus did not suggest that we tolerate our enemies. Jesus commanded us that we love our enemies. In our world today, we are losing the art of a respectful argument, and it is tearing us apart. I consider one of the greatest blessings in my life is that some of my very best friends, the strongest relationships that I have, are with individuals of very different political and religious perspectives. If you are only hanging with those who share the same global perspective, political and religious views, your opinions will be shallow at best. I believe the person who challenges you, who holds you accountable, loves you more than the person who watches you settle for mediocrity. Think of your parents. Think of your professors. Think of your coaches here at the University of Mary and the times they held you accountable because they wanted more for you and your life than mediocrity. Part of making certain that your life is not unexceptional or mediocre is that you invest time in reading and being a lifelong learner and staying informed on the issues that affect our world and our country and our state and our community. 280 characters of a tweet does not qualify as a credible source of well-researched information. And incomplete information and disinformation promotes tyranny. And all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good character and conscience to know the truth, but to remain silent. Martin Niemöller, a respected Lutheran minister in Germany and an ardent critic of Adolf Hitler, once said, "First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak up because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the unborn. And I did not speak up because I was not an unborn. And then they came for the Jews. And I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me because there was no one left to speak up. Pope Francis said, "Ask God for the strength to love. Say to him, 'Lord, help me to love. I cannot do this on my own. I need you.'" And consider the wise and conciliatory tone of Abraham Lincoln during his second inaugural address right after the end of the Civil War, and he said, "With malice towards none." Malice towards none, and charity for all. Let us strive to finish the work that we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to do all which we may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves. The final lesson: live a life of gratitude. I grew up here in Bismarck and never really left. I learned to work on the farm in those early years, picking rocks and hauling bales in Emmons County, not too far from the Shea family farm. As children, we were taught about the importance of hard work, of what it meant to be disciplined and honest and humble, and we learned that example from our parents and our grandparents. The best education available for their kids was the single luxury that was allowed in our family. And I've done the math. I have no idea how my parents financially survived paying for our Catholic education. But I do know this. I do know that they were selfless and they were dedicated to their family. And they made the education of their children a priority over their own wants and desires, and many times needs. I wish I would not have waited so long to say thank you and to express my gratitude to my parents. The families of my grandparents immigrated from Germany, and they grew up in this country, and for the first 40 years of their lives, they did not have electricity or running water or telecommunications, but they were some of the most grateful and joyful individuals I knew. My grandparents and my parents and my in-laws had a deep love for this country, and they felt as if they won the lottery, having the opportunity to live here. During the Depression, life was really hard on the farm, but when things got tough, it didn't dawn on them to blame the government or to ask for help. Well, then they just needed to pray a little more, work a little harder, be a little more creative. It's how they lived their life, and I'm certain there were times that their families lived substantially below the poverty level and never knew it. One of my favorite stories was going fishing with my grandfather. And we took a detour. We went to the Dairy Queen on the way to our favorite fishing spot to get an ice cream cone. And as we approached the counter, my grandfather was fishing in his pocket, and he brought out a quarter and he laid it on the counter. The cones were 5 cents a piece. And he laid that quarter down and he stared at the quarter. And he got kind of melancholy, and I could tell his eyes were getting misty, and we got the cones and went back into the car, and I said, "Grandpa, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm fine, Vern." He said, "Just looking at that quarter took me back to one of the darkest times during the Depression. There was a time that I had 25 cents to my name, and I had 7 kids and a wife that were depending on me. And today, the poverty level is deemed to be running water, electricity, internet connectivity, microwave, stove, refrigerator, hot water, transportation, a cell phone, and a perpetual stream of revenue from our government to suggest that the current generation is worse off than the last is being disingenuous. We have so much to be thankful for. We have so much to be grateful for. Today in our state, we have more jobs than we have people to fill them. Deaths from heart disease, cancer, and automobile accidents have fallen dramatically. When my grandfather was born in 1900, his life expectancy was 31 years old. He lived till he was 92. And as terrible as COVID has been, I am grateful for American ingenuity that produced a vaccine in 3 months rather than 10 years, as was typical, and saved perhaps hundreds of millions of lives. Ladies and gentlemen, graduates, contrary to what you may see on the news or read on social media, we are living in one of the most peaceful times in the history of humanity, absent world wars and global conflicts that have cost hundreds of thousands of innocent lives. In his inaugural address in 1961, President John Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." Somehow, we have lost sight of those important words and find ourselves more often with an outstretched hand and a sense of entitlement, asking for more. The truth is this: yes, we have serious issues in this country, but by just about any standard and in comparison with any nation, we are living prosperous, free, and blessed lives. Luke 12:48. I want you to remember this verse. To whom much is given, much is required. To whom much is given, much is required, and we have been given much. Well, there it is. 3 simple lessons that I urge you to consider embracing as you begin this next magnificent part of your journey of life. And from this day forward, I hope that you will understand the power and the importance of servant leadership. I hope that you will learn to love your enemies. And I hope that your hearts will be full to overflowing with gratitude. May God richly bless each of you. Thank you.